dear people who are back for your daily dose of caffeine with Coffee with YEA. I am Amina Kaja, and I will be your host for today's episode of Coffee with YEA. After Stefan started out strong, I expect that I will carry on his legacy just as well as he started. Leave your order in the comments below, and while you wait for your virtual drink, wait and listen to the amazing chat meal and our guest will have today. Coffee with Yeah has someone awesome invited today. Eldena Dakaj, one of Kosovo's few curling athletes. And since we aren't really big in the sport of curling in the Balkans, I'm going to explain a bit how it looks. So it's played on ice with teams of four, where stones, sometimes known as rocks, are thrown. And then the players quickly polish the ice so that it can get closer to the drawn circles on the floor. And those who get the closest are the ones who get the points. So not only did she come from Kosovo with her team, she also went to Aberdeen where she scored 2 wins. She and her team, of course, let's not forget that. And they won against Nigeria and against Wales. So that's a very great feat for a small country such as ours. Besides this, she is also an activist, a poet, because as everyone knows, I love me some good poetry, and she's also a mentor for youth. So of course we would have her here today. Eldena, welcome. How have you been lately? Has it been too hot for you lately?
Hi, Amina. It's been crazy hot these days, as for everybody, I guess. How have you been,
Same, very hot and melting, but
though?
also very anxious for today. So
Yeah.
okay, so I started already mentioning curling, so it's kind of understandable. I am very curious about it. So it's a little known sport, as I mentioned, especially in countries such as Kosovo and generally countries of the Western Balkans. I honestly cannot remember the last time I saw a skating ring, which is kind of a bummer, right? Especially for the child in me. So can you tell me more how you stumbled upon it? I don't think it's something you're constantly exposed to, like we watch football and volleyball the whole time and not really curling. So how did you manage to learn about it, the ins and outs, and especially when we have the conditions that we do in Kosovo?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, it's not a usual sport such as football, basketball, or handball that we play, you know, in our primary and middle school. So I stumbled upon it in RIT Kosovo, where I was studying. We had a street curling rink, which was made of plastic and some other materials other than ice, anything other than ice. Um, so I was in this sports club with a few of my friends, and they decided to take this curling rink into another level. So we wanted to try curling on real ice. That's why we went to the nearest place possible uh, because of all the visa and stuff like that and all the jet lag. We went to Budapest where we got a Scottish trainer to, train us on curling, and he would learn us everything from beginning to the end. And he was very professional. He already went to a couple of championships and stuff like that. And we kept contacts even after we trained. We trained intensively, so we basically got every basic stuff we needed to learn from him. And yeah, that's how I knew more about it.
Mhm. That's such a great story. So you mentioned your Scottish trainer, right? And I kind of have to add this history because it's really interesting, and I believe you know it. So in 2016, we have Canadian Peter Anderson. He arrived in Pristina actually to volunteer for an internship at a local NGO. And as Kosovo 2.0 tells us, he had been raised with that sport, so he was quite let down that there wasn't such a sport in Kosovo or in Pristina. So, however, after some digging around, he later found out that we indeed had our curling federation, and soon enough, he was offered the position to voluntarily run and advise the federation. Keyword on voluntarily. It's cheap. It's not cheap work. It's something that really makes a change. And as we at We Balkans love talking about volunteering and its importance, this is just another great example of how it brought concrete and good changes in a place, in this case in Kosovo. So tell us, how did Anderson come in contact with you? How, or you with him? Were volunteering as well, or how did that happen?
Well, I wasn't volunteering at the time with the federation because I didn't really know it existed yet. Because the federation was like formed a long time ago, but they didn't really have that much of activity or stuff like that. So when Peter came in, he basically activated them. So, and we got into into a lot of championships. So yeah, that's one of the good things on volunteering because we went into a couple of states and we visited them and we learned at the same time. How I got in contact with Peter was through my university. He was working at the time there in the media center. So when we planned the trip, that's when we kind of became friends and then went to Budapest and then we just continued our friendship and we started on working on curling more and more. So that
So bouncing off of that, so I'm gonna go in a bit other direction, but I want to hear your opinion about it. How do you think it affects children and maybe the future and our education that we don't have the right, in this case we don't have ice, which is seems basic. How do you think it affects their our education and what we do in the future, not having proper materials and proper things needed for example PE?
yeah, well, I mean, if we would have the ice before or now, we'd have established a lot of teams by now, and we'd be, just going around and into championships and, focusing on our hobbies and things we wanted to do more. Unfortunately, here in Kosovo, we don't have a lot of stuff, to do that we can really see where we're good at.
I totally agree that we have maybe kids who are stuck with playing with two balls
Yeah,
type sports, and how would they ever know they're good at curling or maybe gymnastics or
yeah.
whatever else? So we've already kind of gone through this, that the main problem is not having an ice rink. And I'm gonna echo that. So if we built one for curling in Kosovo, if an actual one with ice, it would be the first one of such sorts in the Balkans. So would do you think this would affect other countries and what they believed about this sport? I think sports and arts and such things bring people together and create dialogue and partnership. So what kind of partnership would this bring? Would it create new bridges like it did with Kosovo, Scottish people and Canadians? Since
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, we would have the first rink, the first real rink in Balkans. That's kind of a big deal because out of like 80 places or something, 80 states that do curling and stuff like that, like half of them don't have ice in their country actually. So they all travel to the nearest country possible to go and train or stuff like that. So probably we would get more growth and more tourists or whatever. We would have a bigger cooperation with Balkans because it would be like the epicenter of curling in Balkans because we would all have to go into Switzerland or Warsaw or stuff like that to get some ice, and it would probably be cheaper than the other countries. So yeah, it would actually be a good bridge on connecting us as people and connecting us as neighbors.
lazy. So this
Yes.
is something positive. Have you seen youth who are fighting for it, who are protesting, who are bringing change? You probably have.
Yes, yes, of course. I mean, of course, there are some pretty good volunteers that give everything they have and everything they know into volunteering and into doing something for the better. Um, like for example, the last time I was in Lipian, it was last week. We were discussing and we were brainstorming about initiatives that we want to do and improve their community, and the ideas were really great. They just didn't know how to do it. The ideas were really great, and I think that that's where we come in as NGOs, help them build that app they wanted to do or just build that initiative and help them do it. They just don't have an idea of where to go, most of them. They don't have an idea where to go and how to do it. But that's where we come in, and I think that helps them a lot. But they have really good ideas. They have really good creative ideas and solutions they really want to tackle. So, yeah, this is a great thing. I mean, we're as people, as a generation, as youth, we're very creative. Comparing with probably other countries in general. Of course, I don't want to.
Yeah, yeah, I get what you're saying. So what you mentioned is that it's important to have good ideas, but it's hard to get somewhere without a good mentor or a good coach. I'm
Yeah.
always gonna come back to this because I find it so impressive. And here at We Balkans, the Young European Ambassadors, we kind of our coaches and our mentors are always people from maybe from the EU, people who help us, and they're our mentors. So when it comes to this, you've told us what we are lacking in, what we need to improve on, what we need to build on. So now let's talk about the organizations. What can the organizations, the NGOs themselves, help us out with? What can they offer to us? And what can and should, for example, the EU offer? What would you expect to see from them?
Okay. Well, most of NGOs have open calls on problem solving issues, like for example Upshift with Innovations Lab, and it really does a great job because we give them grants on resolving their problems they're having on their municipalities wherever they are. And then we have a few open calls for startups, which is even greater. But we need to look out for them because you will, for example, have one open call for a startup, and then you won't have one probably until next year or something. So you would have to wait. So I advise for young people who want to do stuff like this, get as much information as possible. Look for pages who offer those NGOs and pages who offer these opportunities because they are giving that. Also, now NGOs are starting to get interns as well. So they would, and paid even, because a few years back, I remember they weren't paying interns. Like most of the companies weren't paying interns. Right now, we have a good opportunity on going as interns as well, and learning and then developing maybe something of our own. We really do have good opportunities here, because there is really, really much to do. We just have to go for it.
That's true. That's good advice. So what I would take away from this is that just you have to be curious. I think
Hmm.
all you need to be an activist and a change maker.
Yeah.
And speaking of calls, especially one coming from the EU, to all the listeners and the watchers, there's the open call for the young European ambassadors right now from We Balkans, and you have time until 10th of July to apply. So make sure you check that out, and of course, check out your local NGOs. And if you don't find an NGO, do it yourself, people. So kind of once again bouncing off from that, um, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. You are, besides you're being a mentor and an athlete, you are also passionate about art. And those kind of come together to make Eldena. So I don't know if you remember, but that's actually how we first met through
Yeah,
social
yeah, I do, I
media.
do.
And you've organized poetry nights and have even created something also new once again, Kosovo's first slam poetry group. And we can see that you're bringing new things to us, continuously working towards that aspect. And what is the impact of these new things? Like you talked a bit about curling, you talked a bit about NGOs and stuff. So what about other new things? Do people take easily to being introduced to new things or to something completely unknown? I would imagine they'd be kind of scared. I think it's intimidating to try something new when you have people who have been doing that for years, like you have, for example.
Well, yeah, we created uh, the group, the club, with two of my friends initially, and now we're like four people that deal with the Poetic Release Club. Um, we weren't the first ones to create a slam poetry to organize a slam poetry. However, after we like, because I think first it was in Pristina High School that created a slam poetry, and then a friend of mine created a slam poet, organized a slam poetry in hackerspace, and there were lots of people. There are lots of people, we would already know about slam poetry. I mean, most of us, and we just didn't really do it. We didn't really take a step forward, but they were interested in knowing that. They were interested in listening to us. They were interested in just going with the poetry, just having something for real, like listening to people just pour out their emotions. So then we started the club, because people were interested in that. I would go to Termokes every Sunday, and I didn't really have a club or anything. We would just gather around, and we were like, hey, let's just do poetry, let's write poetry, let's slam the poetry, you know and we would have a really great time. So when we started, like organizing slam poetries for real, we would have people come, like up to 50 or something, um, because we can't have, I mean, we can, but we just, people are more interested in music, and going into clubs, which is okay. But then we started noticing this uh, new idea, new wave of poets. You know, like we would have in every event we organized a new poet going in stage for the very first time, and it would be great because we knew that we would get them that opportunity because they didn't have it before. They didn't have where to go. They didn't have a stage or anything. And then they continued coming, and they were part of us. They were being part of us. So I think that people expect these things like in a very good way. Um, of course, they're a bit anxious before going in the stage, stuff like that. But we create the environment of everyone feeling comfortable and everyone feeling being themselves. So I think that here in Kosovo, we cannot wait for new things. We're just crazy about them. We might be a little afraid, a little anxious, but we go with it. And I like that. I really like that.
Yeah, I think that's what the youth has to offer the most is new things and being happy to try out new things.
Hmm.
And as you mentioned, the atmosphere is, I remember the first time I went, I think when I met you was one of the first, if not the first, spoken word poetry event I went to. And kind of seeing how maybe not everyone knew each other, but everyone was chatting and everyone was so supportive of each other. It was so great. And I went alone, so I was even more scared. And then you would read poetry, and so that they didn't bother you. They would just do this if they liked it. They wouldn't clap so that they don't kind of overwhelm you or the sound of your voice. It was all so great and so perfect. And I think it really kind of loosened me up when it came to slam poetry, especially. So, yes, I think we're hungry for new things. So, if we do have something new to try out, why not try it out? As you said before, if you don't try it out and you don't have the opportunity to do it, how will you know you're good at it? There's no other way. You have to be scared for you to do something good, right?
Yeah, you never know until you try, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now I actually want to hear some advice from you. We've talked all this inspiring talk, and and I already mentioned it, what words of advice would you give to listeners who may have something in mind, something like curling or slam poetry, but are too afraid to bring it to front? Sometimes fear does overwhelm you. How
Hmm.
do you begin talking about what's on your mind, or where do you find your support? Or do you just speak and then support comes with time?
Well, yeah, I think that's like how it goes most of the time. You speak about it, and then the support will come. However, if you really want to do something or speak about something in particular, or just create something, and you think that you don't have the opportunity, or you don't have the courage or anything like that, well, if you start thinking that way, you're never going to do it. So you better just do it. I might sound like Nike, but but basically that's it. How do you get out of your you know fear if you don't go and confront it? Basically, getting out of your comfort zone is what grows you. It's what develops your personality, and it's what makes you you. I got every opportunity I was offered. It doesn't matter if you think that you probably won't do it, because you'll learn in the process. If, for example, someone offers you a job, a really good job, and you want to do it, but you're like, I don't know if I can do it, you'll learn. You learn. Nobody is born, all knowing.
Exactly.
So just get every opportunity you would people would offer to you, or just go and look for new opportunities and get them by yourselves. It doesn't matter how small or how big they are, because if you want to develop yourself, and if you want to develop your idea, or if you want to develop your creative thinking, it doesn't matter how small that job that you're doing is, or how big or how irrelevant it might look to you now, because it will be irrelevant in your future.
That's so great. So I love how you mentioned that no matter how small or how big it is,
Mhm.
you're still doing something. It's gonna matter at one point. And you mentioned that you started out small with your poetry group, going in Kiss, and then just being a couple of guys just chatting and talking about poetry, and then
Yeah.
it became something maybe bigger than life here. So once again, we go back to the first thing you said, that if you just speak and don't let your fear take over, you will have support. It will come in its own way, maybe in the form of three, four people, maybe in the form of Eldena or Amina, but it will
Mhm.
be there.
Yes.
And then you'll see how big it gets. Doesn't matter how small you start out.
Yes,
So,
as long as you continue in small steps and you don't stop, yes, of course.
yes, you're preaching today. I love it. I live for this. So we've thrown the word support here and there, and once again, I'm going back to it. You've had your fair share of experience in this aspect, and we're going back to the EU now. It has many opportunities, many projects, and uh, workshops for and opportunities for grants, like Creative Europe, to mention one, since we're talking about arts. How would you advise us, me or the listeners, your peers, how to use these? What changes would you like to see in society? What maybe new thing have you seen and maybe you wanted to try out here? New things?
Well, if you get a grant or a project, that means they are liking your job, right? They're liking your idea. But the idea that you go initially with, and apply, go with the idea you would really love to see, not just like it, not just because some people are telling you that that's a great idea and you want to do it, but you don't, you know, just go and apply for the idea that you really want to do, because that's the will and the passion that keeps a work happening and continuing and going. Because if you go with one idea that, just comes out of the blue and from, friends and colleagues and then think, and you agree to it, but you don't love it, you're going to fail maybe most of the time. So that's how you use it. If you got the idea that you love, and basically they're approving the idea that you love, then and some projects last for 6 to maybe 1 year, for the use and stuff like that, but it doesn't mean that it should end for you in that period of time. You can continue getting more grants, you could continue getting more uh support again from other people maybe, and raising that idea to be probably after a few years your own company.
Mhm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And while you didn't give anything specific, do this, I think what you mentioned is the source of everything else you can do. And I think that the reason I'm chatting with you here today is exactly because you've loved so much curling and art and you went on with it. Maybe if it was like basketball or something else, we
Yeah,
wouldn't be here because it's something you just heard from other people and didn't love yourself. And what you're saying is inspiring me. And honestly, I'm feeling as if I should maybe apply for the ambassadors for a second time, or just search for other things and contact Pan or something. So I hope everyone is feeling as inspired as I am. And
spam their emails, just send
yes,
send applications.
after some time they will have to accept you
Yeah,
sooner or later. Okay, so unfortunately, this pleasant conversation has to come to an end. Coffees can't last forever.
yeah.
So, to wrap everything up, is there anything you would like to add or say that you didn't get the opportunity to? Maybe like a last inspiring message, because it seems like we haven't had enough today.
um Love what you do what you love.
Don't say anymore. That's it. That's great. Great last words from Eldena Dakaj. Okay, Eldena, thank you so much for being part of episode 2 of Coffee with Yes. It was a pleasure having you here and hearing more from what you do. We certainly hope to hear more from you in the future and maybe you having your own curling federation. So thank you once again. As for the listeners, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed today's session, and see you next time. Enjoy your coffee.